Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 18 of Moriarty the Patriot, the Merchant of London. So, the last two episodes were really, really good. I really liked Patterson's adventures with Bond. I really like Bond's character a lot. I liked Irene, but Bond's a lot better. Bond is better. So, I really like Bond's character. I like how he has integrated into the Moriarty crew. I really loved in the last episode just how much Sherlock is so frustrated because he's figuring out that he's being played by Moriarty and he's trying to figure out what do I do about that. So it's setting up a lot of interesting things, and with this being episode 18, we are leading into the final arc or the final act of the series, which is sad. I'm really sad about that because I really like this series, and I'm sad that I feel like, and several of you have commented at this point, that a lot of this has been condensed from the manga. It's left out things. The manga's ongoing. That's frustrating because I am excited. I am eventually going to read the manga. I've got a lot of projects going on right now with manga reading, so I will read the manga at some point. We are going to watch a series after this. I'm not doing the Yona thing where I'm going to the manga reactions just because I've talked in the previous reactions about the reasons why, but I am going to eventually read the Moriarty manga, and I do want to do a soapbox talking about what all has been left out and reviewing that and talking about it with you all. So I do eventually want to do that. I don't know if it'll be immediately after I'm done with this series or if it may be something that I work on this spring to try to put all together, because I want to give it enough time and take my time with it to be able to jot notes and write things out and do things that I want to with it. So I am going to look at the manga and talk about that. It just may be at a later date once we've started the series that comes after this. But yeah, so with that being said, I am sad that we're getting into the third act because I feel like there's so much stuff left out that I'm going to be able to see in the manga, but that I don't get to see here. And it's frustrating. Frustrating, right? So with that being said, though, we are on episode 18, so I'm curious to know, we've set things up. We've got old Milverton. Milverton's been set up. Old Charles, he's in the background somewhere. He was absent the last couple episodes, and I'm funny that we just conveniently forget about him for the moment, even though he's been set up as a possible antagonist. So we've got him waiting in the background. We've got this whole thing kind of starting to come to a head with the Moriarty plan, whatever that entails. And then Sherlock's onto the fact that he's being used. Lestrade's been promoted. Patterson's been majorly promoted. And so everything is the pieces of the chessboard are all kind of falling into place. And I'm curious to see what all ends up happening with them afterwards. So yeah, just typical run-of-the-mill stuff. So with that being said, I am excited to get into this and see what all happens. So we're not going to waste any more time. Let's dive into this, shall we? We're going to start episode 18 of Moriarty the Patriot, and we are going to start that here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So this episode, back with Jack the Ripper, when Jack Rendleton, there were several people in the comments that were the murder children, Jack teaching all these kids how to be murderers. This was before then. Right? This took place before they even met Albert. It was just him and Lewis at that old orphanage. And our boy William was pretty much a serial killer from back then. But I say serial killer. There's more to it than that. But our little murder child here, just getting all literal. Because he's a kid. And as a kid, he's read Merchant of Venice and he's done all this. And he's he takes it very literally, which makes sense for a kid. He's no, this is what he asked for. I can't believe he put that in writing. That's so arrogant of the Baxter guy to put it in writing, being yeah, if I don't pay you back, you can take a pound of my flesh. That's so, when he told the woman that was running, the madame that was running the orphanage, he made it sound well, if I can't pay you back the 300 pounds, then my body is yours. You can do whatever you want with me. And I was okay, well, then you could make him build the orphanage or give the money back. Not that he'd put it in writing that a pound of flesh, very tongue-in-cheek. At that point, I think she should have realized she was getting swindled because, that's not very professional. But then again, it's 1800s, so what can we do? But this whole episode being bookended by Milverton and his like reasoning that Moriarty is his enemy. That's the curious thing, because I don't know Milverton from the short stories. I don't know his character, so I don't want to be spoiled either, obviously. But I find it fascinating that now Moriarty has an enemy, because I don't know. See, the funny thing is, we spent the last couple episodes establishing that Sherlock may not be Moriarty's enemy in all this. Sherlock is slowly realizing. It's funny because we have this realization. Sherlock is realizing that the Moriarty organization may not be his enemy, so to speak. It's rather the fact that Sherlock is having to come to grips with, because Sherlock has been established as a very morally ethical character. Like, he's eccentric and he kind of skirts the line, but at the end of the day, he is morally ethical. And Moriarty kind of flies in the face of everything he believes. But the last episode we spent with Sherlock realizing, okay, he is like a Robin Hood figure in the darkest of ways, but he's not necessarily an enemy. So Sherlock's frustrated because he's like, I want to out the Moriarty figure and out the Lord of Crime to the rest of the world. He's like, but in doing so, I'm possibly preventing him from helping society. So Sherlock's been put into all this turmoil because of that revelation, right? And he doesn't even know his brother's involved. Like, once he figures out Mycroft's involved, that may throw a whole nother cog into the machine. But Milverton seems like, because he's realized who Moriarty is and what he's doing, that has made him an enemy. So I'm curious to know whose side Milverton is on. From the outset, it would look like Milverton's on nobility's side and the system's side, and Milverton wants to keep the system in place. So Moriarty is a direct problem in terms of keeping the status quo. So maybe that's it, but I don't want to be spoiled. I want to find out in this final arc. But that's very, very curious. Huh. But yeah, this whole episode, this murder child, oh my god. Oh, just this kid, this terrifying child, right? This terrifying child. I love how we start out establishing, though, that Moriarty always has had like the teacher mentality within him. Like, I love that he teaches the kids the math problem in the dirt, like with the stick in the dirt. And it's really just to show how money is equivalent, like what equals what. And in doing so, he teaches the kids how to multiply and figure out how to make that number bigger. And I'm like, that's really cool. I love that William is showing that he has like the roots of being a teacher from the early onset as being a kid. Most people have no clue what they want to do with their lives. But William knew from age 5 that he not only wanted to murder the nobles, but also be a teacher. So I'm glad he's figured this all out at an early age. Prodigy indeed, right? And I like that we established with Lewis's character from the onset, like how caring Lewis is and compassionate he is. Like, they're in the orphanage, and I love that they're by candlelight. They're eating like the bread and gruel, like that's all they have. And Lewis is kind enough to offer the one kid his share as well, because he's just that nice. It's like, he's that compassionate. And then this poor woman running the orphanage, this poor woman, like, I like that she's just like, oh, William, you're figuring out all my problems ahead of time, like usual. She kind of reminded me of Albert a little bit, which is interesting. She had she has red hair in this, but she had the green eyes, which I think is curious. The color green pops up in this episode as well. Like, you had her green eyes, you had Baxter's green suit, like the green showing up there. And I like that, she seems very kind and empathetic. And then Baxter shows up and says he only requires another 300 pounds. Like, she's been giving him money and he's been swindling her and not getting back to her. Because the orphanage from the outset looks like it's okay here, but clearly from the inside, that it's in horrible disrepair and she doesn't have any money. They need a new orphanage. So, and it's the classic tale that he comes to her with his sob story, and he has the pretty face, like he's a handsome man, and he seems kind, and she just completely falls for it. He like seems so distraught and like handsome and kind, and she just hook, line, and sinker goes for it. And then, and then of course William with his anytime William has like the candlelight and the kind soft eyes, I'm like, no, he's plotting something, and you should probably be scared. Because he's like, oh no, we'll go get it. And I love that we tied back to the steak. Like, I was wondering, because from the onset, you think that the steak, him cutting into the steak and the blood running out, you think, because he ordered the steak rare and there's all the fat and stuff on it, the flesh, you think that it's just a symbol for him, like, you know, like Denethor in Lord of the Rings, it's just a symbol of the wealthy, like, eating, and, like, there's the blood and everything as the rest of the world suffers. Like, it's just a symbolic representation of that. From the onset, it seems like that's the only use that that steak is going to serve, is being that representation. And I like that, going back to the scene, you don't see the waiter's face in the initial scene. You don't see his hair color, you don't see his face at all. You don't get any of that. So that when he comes back as the waiter, as the defendant, as the witness, you're like, oh, we didn't see him from the start. That's why we didn't recognize him. Case in point. And it also shows that Baxter didn't recognize him as well because he didn't care, right? But yeah, I like that the steak comes back to be the argument that, well, when you get a pound of flesh, you don't care about the blood. So why does it matter now? I'm like, towing some lines, like really stretching it thin there, but okay. And so from the start, it seems like Baxter just wants to get rid of the kids. And so he sends them on the way with some like pocket change, which should have been the sign at the beginning, because he had the alms to give them. It was a sign that he had the money to start with, but that's not what they're there for. And so I like that William, the question is of how William got the 600 pounds, but again, that doesn't matter. That part's irrelevant. How he got it, you know, he could have stole it for all we know. We don't know where he got the money from. He says he's been saving it up, but I'm curious where he found the money from. I guess it doesn't matter. That's not the point. He could have just taken it from another noble for all we know. But yeah, the idea, I love the representation that he's sitting there going, oh, I don't have any money to give you. And he's surrounded by all this wealth. Like, it's such a very visual and true statement. Like when people are like, oh, I can't spare anything. And it's like, you have this house. You could have probably sold and when Lewis looks at the vase on the table, when he says, oh, I don't have any money to give you back. It's like, in that moment, Lewis is probably thinking, you could sell this one vase alone and pay back the 600 pounds easily. Like, you clearly have the means to give the money back. You just don't want to, right? And Lewis and William are like, we just want construction on the orphanage. Why can't you do that? So I like that we don't really get any backstory with, so far, this is as far back in William and Lewis's story as we've gone. Like, we still don't know, like, if they were actually born from nobility or if they've really been orphans from just a regular. I kind of want it to be that way. I want it to just be that William and Lewis were from a regular family and were orphaned. They have no ties to nobility, but William just happens to have been born a prodigy. I want that to be the case. Like, I really hope that that's the case, and they're just two normal kids. Normal. So then, yeah, the whole thing. But yeah, Lewis looking at the vase, realizing all the expensive plateware. He's like, I don't have any money to repay. It's like, sure you do. And as they're looking at these expensive, beautiful plates, William's like, we don't even have enough to eat right now. If you don't repay the money at once, our orphanage will be unable to operate. He's like, you don't understand. And then, yeah, the Baxter guy's like, oh, I'm aware of the importance of that money. And it's like, are you? No, you're not. And so then, yeah, I love the idea that he gives, and you could just see the greed on his face. And I like that the green in his suit is representation of that. He's like, I'll personally lend you an additional 300 pounds. Will this be enough to get the construction started without delay? And then he's like, sure thing, little kid. And then, of course, because it's Moriarty the Patriot and we have to show how awful our villains are, they make him like have the green filter, and he's just looking as dastardly as possible. I'm like, we could have probably gotten that without seeing it, but this show's like, nah, we want to show you it. Just to further reinforce how shady this guy is, so that when this child is pulling a razor blade to his throat, you won't feel so bad. Right? I feel like that's the only reason they did this over-the-top moment with him, because when Moriarty has like a blade to his throat and he's trying to act innocent, you'll know that that's all an act. Mm-hmm. And so then we get the hint of Lewis with the cough. We get the hint of Lewis being slightly sick, and Lewis questioning him like, are you sure about lending the man another 300 pounds on top of what it is? And William's like, yes, I just did exactly as the contract says. And they tie back to the Merchant of Venice. And I absolutely love that William says in the actual play, the court does not allow Shylock to cut out his flesh, nor does he even get the money he lent returned to him. So like the Merchant of Venice doesn't exactly end in the most just way possible in William's eyes. But I love that line where he says to Lewis, "Oh, that will not happen to us, Lewis." I was like, oh God. Yeah, no. And Lewis is like, okay. He's like, we're going to turn things around in the most famous court case in all the world, the Merchant of London. So what I love about this is it's showing William's sense of justice from like the onset of all this. From the very start, Lewis and William have been fighting for the justice in the world. And for William, his sense of justice means like putting this nobleman in his place and showing just how it's not cool to be corrupt in the system and to cheat, innocent orphanage owners out of their money. So you totally get where William's coming from. And I love that the judge even agreed to this. He's like, well, it's a legal case, but there's this kid who's okay, his own, defense attorney, fine. But yeah, and Baxter has the look on his face the entire time that he just looks like this sympathetic actor. He's like, oh, woe is me. And I love how serious William is. He's just like the most serious little child holding these asset papers. Yeah. And so he tries everything. He tries to give him every possible out. He's like, can't you sell your home? And Baxter's already transferred the home to another friend. And he's like, no, I'm just borrowing it. It's like, okay, well, can't you do anything with your company? And he's like, well, no, the company's actually bankrupt and I'm a fallen aristocrat. I don't know what to do. And then William's like, okay, so if you can't meet the terms, then no sympathy for you. Let's just chop out your flesh. And it's like, okay. And he just pulls the razor blade out. Yeah. And Baxter thinks he's getting out of it. And it's like, nope. I just love that he has this razor blade and he's like, let's do this. And it's great. This moment where this child is going up to an adult, like walking up to him with this razor blade, like, if I don't do this, it'll call the entire nation's sovereignty into question. Like, this is our legal system. It's absolute, right? Gotta abide by the law. I love it. I love how he's so matter of fact. This little child, he just walks up. He's like, I'm contractually obligated to meet this request. So, gotta do this. I just love that they're all backing away from this tiny child. It's like Chucky. Like, they're just backing away from this tiny doll-like child. And the way that Moriarty looks, like the look in his eyes are so huge. Like, he just has these huge red eyes. And they're like, when he looks up at them and they're in the shadows, they're so enormous. Like, you can see the red eyes from the shadows. And it's terrifying. Terrifying. And yeah, Baxter's like, are you serious? And then the attorney's like, now hold on. Whoa. I like that the attorney thinks this up in the moment. He's like, how do I stop this child from murdering this man in court? Okay, the pound of flesh does not include blood. Let's just go with that. I like that this attorney is worth his salt. He's trying to do his job. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I love it. And the best part is, well, before we get to the best part of the thing, just the fact of William's face in the shadows and his eyes are just soulless. And you could just tell that in that moment. I like that even as a child in this moment where William, his brain is probably going like a mile a minute, like, okay, how do I get out of this? And I like that he kind of prepared for it. He had the waiter in the wings ready to go. Like, he kind of thought ahead about this. And he's like, okay, they're going to do this. Oh my God. Like, just the soulless look in William's eyes. Like, he just is about to kill this kid. This man. Oh my God. And so then, yeah, he just has the witness waiting in the wings. And the witness doesn't even really know what's going on until it's questioned. And William goes from being this terrifying child with dead, soulless shark eyes, ready to kill Baxter, to I want to just get a screenshot of this. Like, I want to just show this screenshot of his face where he's just like, okay, yeah, let me question you. What the hell? William, like, he just goes back to being this, like, just like a switch flips and he's back to being normal little William. Oh my God. And then, yeah, they make the argument about the blood. And he's like, we've never considered that for 20 years. And then just slowly goes back to him. And then I love that Baxter questions him. He's like, well, you don't even know the play that you're basing your accusations on. And then he quotes it. He quotes the Antonio line. I was like, oh my God. And says, I've memorized all of Shakespeare's 40 works. Line for line. Because he's a prodigy. Has photographic memory. He's a prodigy. Of course he has. And then just looks with that look on his face. Like the eyes, again, the huge eyes. And he basically, he draws blood. He's like, and he's even like, we won't subject them to see this. And he like this little kid throws his coat over him to shield it. And he's like, you're going to give us all of your assets or I'm going to kill you. And it's like, and he agrees to it. It's amazing. It's amazing. And then Milverton points out, and I wanted to pause this, that following the trial, so we have the records Milverton has. It says report case and decisions in all court of judgment for debt. Interesting. It says payment of money out of court. Payment of money out of court. The Viscount Baxter versus St. James Orphanage. Okay. So that's that they did the case as an orphanage. So they didn't put his actual name there. And then they look up the family, and the other papers are the family record of Albert James, William James, and Louis James. All three James Moriartys. Yep. And so after the trial, they established here that after it was all said and done, that the young men, basically the young men donated the vast wealth they obtained from Baxter to the orphanage and then disappeared. So they gave all the money back to the madame so that she could start her own orphanage and keep those kids fed, and then they disappeared from sight. And from that point, then, upon investigating the adopted third son who perished in that fire, I arrived at this court record. There is no doubt about it. He is the current middle Moriarty boy. Yep. William James Moriarty. Okay. So he's figured it out. After the family manor had burnt down, he took the place of the real William. Yeah, so he's figured it out. The third child. So basically, Louis getting adopted is what threw him off, is what gave him the clue. And he's like, oh, there's this third Moriarty kid that's been adopted. And that's what tied. Then he was able to tie Louis to William, being like, okay, well, William James Moriarty is not actually Albert's brother. It's the kid from the past in the court case. He's just clearly killed the original William James Moriarty and taken his place. He's put two and two together, Milverton. And judging by the fact that the other brothers accept him, that means that they're all complicit. So yeah, now he's like, okay, because that makes total sense. If Milverton's figured out that William has replaced the old William, the fact that Louis and Albert are totally okay with it means that they know what happened and they're fine with it. That they are all complicit in the fact that William, the original William Moriarty, was murdered and our boy William took his place. That's the assumption that Milverton's come to, and he's not wrong. And then, yeah, that's when Milverton says, William James Moriarty is my enemy. With those snake eyes. Ugh! So yeah, this episode was great. It completely establishes Moriarty's character and how he feels during all of this and his viewpoints and everything. Completely establishes it. Makes total sense. Totally adds up. Holy crud. But yeah. Interesting, right? So I feel like this episode's really important for setting up not only William's character moving forward and the fact that he's a prodigy and the fact that he's as intelligent as he is and the fact that he always is one step ahead to prepare for anything possible. I think that it's setting up that for one, but also to set up Milverton's disdain and, created nemesis against Moriarty going into this third act. So fascinating, right? I don't want to be spoiled, but I feel like this episode it's going to feel a lot more important moving forward now that we've seen it, especially going into the final episodes of the series. So this is great though. Good times. Good times with murder children. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, what y'all thought of this episode. I thought it was really, really good. but I'm very, very curious to see how much of an impact it's going to have later on in the rest of the season. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers. But yeah, so I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I will be back very soon with episode 19 of Moriarty the Patriot. Bye.